Well, good morning, buenos dias, bon dia. And JJ is okay, but people also call me Jeje. Because the J sound does not exist in Castellano, so I had a bit of a problem when I came here. So my department director, he gave me a Catalan name which is Janice. So, which I was not very comfortable with for the first few years because it sounded more feminine to me, like as in Janice. So I was a bit reluctant, but now I tell people I'm Janice, to make it more easier. Yeah. So thank you very much, Senior Rector and Dr. Gallucci. You believe it or not, you still continue to be my mentor because he's a continuous source of inspiration, and whenever I get a chance, I always bug him and talk to him. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and it's always fun to come and talk about your own country. It's a great opportunity for me. But there's a little caveat here because I left India in 2002. Okay, I moved to the United States. Been living outside of India for the last 10, 12 years. So I have gone back, of course, to visit, and my knowledge of India has grown because in the last 5-10 years, it has changed a lot. So every time I go back, I get a lot of surprises. So I take photos, I do some research, and I try to figure out what's going on. So in a way, I'm giving you a perspective that I have collected in the last few years of my own country, with a lot of surprises for myself, and I think I put together some interesting things to present for today. However, we have to keep in mind that this is a very dynamic kind of environment, and India is a country which is changing a lot. Okay, so whatever happens this year may not be valid next year, and so on. So whatever information I have today, it has to be taken with a pinch of salt and with the caveats. So let me start with no poke. You have to point toward that. Here I have, if I move to this seat, maybe it's better for me because I can also see what I have. All right. So here I have the state equivalents. So these are the states of India, which is 28. Now a new state is being created as we speak. So 28, 29 states. And these are the population equivalents in terms of countries. So we have tried to put here, this is done by The Economist, so I just copied it. So they've done a great job by putting different countries in terms of in the states, and I have another one here. Sorry, I'm going back. This one is, I believe, the population. No, this is the GDP. Okay, this is the GDP equivalent of the different states of India with different countries. So basically, the point I'm trying to make here is like Senior Rector said, that India is huge. Okay, it's a big country. It's maybe composed, you can say, of many countries within a country. And this is the only country which is also known as the subcontinent. So it's a subcontinent, it's a small continent in itself. Okay. I will go now to, I'm going back and forth, I'm sorry. I think by the time I end the presentation, I'll get a hang of it. So I'll talk a little bit about the history and the legacy of the country. So I would like to take you back about 5,000 years in the history. And this is Indus Valley civilization, which flourished in the northwest part of India, a part where I am from. Currently, this part is actually, it's gone in Pakistan, most of it. This is a city called Mohenjo-daro, We don't know what they used to call it at that time, but now that's what the archaeologists call it. And it has 40,000 inhabitants, and it was a very good example of very good town planning. So these guys had perfectly straight roads cutting each other at 90 degrees. They had a sewer system. They had toilets. They had baths. You can see here a structure which resembles a swimming pool, which is up here in the middle of the slide. So they were very advanced in terms of planning and many other things. And this is 5,000 years earlier from now. Some other things, we had some universities which were flourishing. This one, University of Takshila. Again, this place now is in Pakistan. It is 700 BC. It's known to be amongst the first universities in the world. Then you have another one which is in modern-day Bihar, which is a state in India in the east. And this was is among the first residential universities which attracted international students. So we were talking about the students coming from different countries, and now ESADE, for example, we have students represented from many different countries. So this is an example from 450 AD, where we had about 10,000 students studying in India, and they came from all over the world, from China, Korea, Turkey, Persia, and Japan. Okay. And now there is a movement to recreate this university. Some countries are coming together, and they're putting some effort and so on. A few other things. So we often jokingly say that the contribution that the Indians have made to the world of mathematics is zero. Zero as in the decimal zero, because that is believed to be invented / discovered, whatever you want to call it, in India. And there were many other things like negative numbers, decimal systems, which have antecedents in the mathematical work done by the Indians in the ancient times. Talking about medical science, we had a doctor called Dr. Sushrita in 6th century BC. He performed a lot of surgeries, and he was known to use about 120 surgical instruments, lots of different surgical procedures. And he's also known to be the father of plastic surgery and the cosmetic surgery that we see these days. So now going a bit towards the economy. Starting from year 180, this is the economy in terms of the GDP for major powers in the world. And you will see here France, Germany, Italy, UK, Greece, Portugal, Spain, and then I've combined the 29 Western European countries. And then I have Japan, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, China, and India, which is known to be some powers from that time. And India contributed about 32% of the global GDP. And if you look at the GDP per capita, this is the average GDP per capita. And it was among, it was not the highest, but it was quite similar to many other countries which are in this list. Okay, this was again 1 year AD. And this has been the development of the same GDP as a percentage of the total GDP contribution to the overall GDP of the world. The one in orange color here is the Indian GDP, and you see that it has been it played a very dominant role, and then it has been shrinking over a period of time. And there are some other countries that have been growing. So this green one, for example, is the United States, okay, which came into existence quite late, and they have been growing. And this is the share of the global manufacturing output from 1750. And India contributed 24.5% at that time. And China was number one, of course. And so then came the British, okay? And then everything went downhill. So this is the GDP per capita evolution, which I showed you earlier. So if you see down here, India is down here in the blue, and it's been continuing to be where it was in the 1st century AD. So just flat, whereas other countries have been growing more. And now it's picking up. In the last, maybe 20, 30 years, now it's starting to pick up. But the GDP growth per capita has been the same. Well, no growth, but it has been stable. This is the share of GDP the graph that I showed you a few slides back. So it's been decreasing, and you see a big, downwards slant somewhere in the middle of the slide, and that's when the East India Company, formed by the British colonial empire, they came to India and they started to set up their empire and all. So that's exact correlation with that time. So the share of global global manufacturing output was 24% in 1750, and by the time we reached 1900, it was 2%. Okay, and then it fell down further. It went all the way to maybe less than 0.5% before it's starting to increase. So these were all due to the policies, colonial policies followed by the British, and many other factors. So what happens after that was that we achieved independence. In 1947, India received its independence and stopped being a British colony. And they did some reforms and stuff, so which I'm going to talk about in a bit. So we got the independence, 1947. This is the result of that. So we have a big country with a huge coastline, 28 states, 7 territories, lots of representation of different religions. Population as of now is about 1.2 billion, 17% of the total population of the world. So it's a big country with a lot of diversity, a lot of diverse groups, ethnicities, religions, and so on. So, but what happened with the economy was not very promising in the beginning, because, after being ruled by a foreign power for many, many years, people were a bit scared, and they become too conservative. Okay, they wanted self-reliance, self-dependence. So the economy was very closed. There was a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of protectionism, conservatism. There was licensing. So for everything you wanted to do, you had to go through a license process, which took years and years. So the economy was not growing as much. But in 1990, there were some economic reforms, but because the economy was doing really bad, which we call as liberalization. So licensing was eliminated, some taxes were removed or reduced. So it was to stimulate the foreign direct investment. And this is the time when the economy actually started to pick up, and then people started talking about India as being one of the major powers and so on, and emerging markets. Okay. So what happened after this was that the share of imports and exports in the GDP increased. There was a significant increase in the agricultural and industrial outputs, and the economy was growing quite fast. For example, from 2003 to 2007, it was average 8.8%, which is a good growth rate. However, last few years have been a bit bumpy. If you look at the growth rate from the last few years, I couldn't put the numbers here, but last year, it was 5%, less than 5%, and it has been like this for the last couple of years. Okay, so now things are a bit bumpy, a bit shaky. Hopefully, it will recover, hopefully. So we had employment, we were creating jobs, we were trying to alleviate poverty after these reforms. And as a result, this is actually the growth. I'm sorry, the graph is not really visible, so I'm going to skip that. It just shows that the growth rate of Indian economy as compared to the Chinese and the US and the Spanish, it has been doing good, and now in the last couple of years it's been falling down. So I'm going to skip this slide. In terms of ease of doing business, I don't want to paint a very rosy picture about India, because it has a lot of opportunities and lots of people, lots of consumers growing with discretionary income, but at the same time we still have problems with bureaucracy, we have problems with infrastructure, So in terms of ease of doing business, it's ranked unfortunately 134th in the world out of a total of 180 something. Okay, hopefully this will improve. Okay. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the cultural diversity. So India is basically, there's no one India, there are many different Indias. It is possible for me to go back to India and run into somebody somewhere in India with whom I, couldn't connect or talk to because they speak a totally different language than I do, and we don't have anything common to talk about. It's possible. So each state in itself is like a country. So if there are 28 states, there are 22 different languages officially recognized. So every other state or each state has its own language more or less. We have, festivals, different ethnicities, languages, ceremonies. This is about the languages, where we have 22 national languages, 800 dialects. Hindi is the official language of the Union. English is the language of choice for business and for education. And then we have, many different regional languages that are also considered to be official languages. Religions, of course, the dominant one is Hinduism, okay, which is the major religion in India. About 80% of the people follow that, followed by Islam. Sikh, which is my religion, Christianism, Jain, Buddhism, and Judaism. We have many different forms of art, dances. There are 7 classical dance forms, which are very difficult to master, and people spend years and years learning these. Festivals. This is a very peculiar festival where people put color on each other. It's called Holi. It's in the springtime, and the interesting thing about this is that this is becoming very famous in other countries as well. I know of a Catalan couple who goes to India to learn yoga, and then they teach yoga here in Sabadell. And they organize a big Holi party in Sabadell each year. And there are thousands of people who come there and they celebrate it. I would like to go sometime and to see what is their interpretation, but they told me that it's a big success. Then we have the Festival of Giants, okay, towards the fall, which is called Dussehra. We also have giants here in Catalonia, but this concept is slightly different. In this case, we burn the giants in the end, okay, because they're projecting some evil characters from the mythology. Then we have the Diwali, which is a very famous festival again in the fall, where we light up a lot of lights and fireworks, and people give gifts. So it's the equivalent of Christmas for us. And then I found something very interesting, which is this tendency of people to try to build castles by standing on top of each other. They do that here in Catalonia a lot during festivals and ceremonies. And we have the yellow one on this side is from India, from Mumbai. And we also have a very similar tradition, but there's nothing common about them. I think they just develop independently of each other. But they're just very, very interesting. And sometimes I've heard that people from Mumbai, they're invited to come here and perform and build their castles. So my take on things is, I'm not an economist or a historian, but more of a marketing professor, marketing guy, so a student of marketing. So I will talk a little bit about the consumers, about the demographics, about the opportunities. So the growing population is projected to reach about 1.4 billion by 2025 at a quite fast growth rate. This is a good thing and a bad thing also, because the more people you have to worry about feeding them, provide infrastructure, provide jobs. There is something very interesting about this. The population is very youthful. Okay. So if I show you some graphs here, this is the comparison of the Spanish population distribution, and the Indian one is on the top. And you will see that the younger age groups are represented on the top, and the more older are in the bottom. And from this graph, you can deduce that the Indian population is mostly younger people, more youthful, as compared to some other modern and developed economies like Spain, where you have a less proportion of the youth and there is more dependency. This can also be shown from this population pyramid, which shows the distribution of the age groups in the population over the next 10-15 years. And again, you will see that most of the people, the biggest proportion of the population is from the youth. Okay, as compared to, let's say, I put Spain as an example because we're in Spain. If I can move it forward. So the pyramid is actually looking opposite. It's like inverted. So there are less young people and more elderly people. So this means that, you know, we have a lot of private consumption, a lot of people are consuming. By the year 2025, it's projected to be the 5th largest in terms of private consumption. And this is due to the fact that people are moving away from spending on basic necessities like food and shelter to more luxury and discretionary spending. Okay? And that is an opportunity for different companies. So this is the move from the necessity to the discretionary is very important, and people are going to spend more and more on education, recreation, transportation, personal products, services, and so on. Okay. In terms of the segments, you know, still there have been some tries, you know, because India is so big, you can segment in whichever way you want. But this is a nice try by McKinsey Global Institute. They have tried to divide people on the basis of demography. Although, you know, I've learned from Carlo that we don't really put a lot of emphasis on demographics when we do segmentation. However, it's a good starting point. Okay, so I have here some segments which I will like to discuss with you. So we have the deprived segment, which is the bottom of the pyramid, the very poor people, followed by the aspirers, which are also poor. Okay. Then you have the seekers and the strivers, which form the middle class. And then the globals are people who are rich and who have money and who are spending and buying all the top brands and all that and traveling a lot. So the deprived people are usually unskilled or low-skilled laborers, part-time employment, they have a large household size, and they depend on subsidized food and healthcare. Okay. I can give you an example. These examples are some people that I came across while traveling in my country, so I clicked their photos and I asked their permission to use and wrote something about them. So this is a couple who work as laborers in the poor rural provinces of central India. 4 children, none of them goes to school, and their mother also lives with them. They depend on government food and health subsidies. And they want to move to a nearby town or a city to have a better life. So these are the very poor, the poorest of the poor people. Then you have the aspirers, which are relatively slightly better than the poor, the first segment. Small-time shopkeepers, small-scale farmers, low-skilled industry workers. They typically spend 50% of their income on the basic necessities. And an example of this will be this guy, Sucha. I happen to know him. He's from the same province as I am. He's an electrician. He has 4 kids and a wife who live in a nearby village, have a small piece of land. He's not educated. His kids go to the village school. Not a lot of focus on education still. And a few things that they own are a small TV, cell phone, and an iron. And they always have struggle in their life to meet the ends. Then you have the seekers, which are now going into the middle class. Okay, college graduates, government employees, traders, businessmen. An example of this will be this guy who works in a private bank. His wife is a teacher. They have 2 children, go to private schools. They put a lot of emphasis on education, and they own a few more things than the previous groups. Then you have the strivers. These, now we are talking about the upper middle class maybe. These people are more successful. They're rich farmers, industrialists, senior government officials. They go for yearly vacations, usually within India or maybe nearby countries, and they are brand conscious. So this is a couple that I know. They own a group of restaurants and bakeries in a city called Amritsar, which is a city where my wife is from. And they live in a family house. They have a car, a bike. Their kids go to good private schools, and they are, really brand conscious. They talk about brands all the time. And then finally, you have the globals, which is the top, the rich, the creamy layer. And that includes big industrialists, large-scale farmers, senior executives, top-tier professionals, and politicians. Okay, if you are a politician by default, you will end up being in this list by one way or another. These guys go to vacations to Europe, United States, other countries. They own more than one car. This is an example. A friend of mine who is an MBA working as a director of international chain of fitness centers in North India. His wife is a doctorate in language, and they have a very good life. They travel, abroad, and so they represent the top, the globals. In terms of development and distribution of these groups, you see in 1985, most of the people were poor. Okay, they belong to the bottom, the last category, which has been changing, and now it's projected that by 2025 we'll have about 40% of the people which are in the middle class, and then we still have the deprived, but the ratio is decreasing. Okay, so this is a good news and good opportunity, because when people enter into middle class, into the higher groups, they have more income, they spend more. And that provides more opportunities. Just to give you an example of the middle class, it's going to be about 500 million people projected by 2025, just the middle class, okay, the two middle groups. And just to give you an idea of how big this group is, so this is, let's say this is in 2025, okay, in the future, this is the Indian middle class, 500 million people, sorry. Then I've added here, just to give you a contrast, this is current population of Spain, this is Italy, this is the total population of these countries, that is France, that is United Kingdom, that is Germany, that is Poland, that is Holland, Portugal, Greece, Belgium, Austria, and the Czech Republic, and that is Scandinavia, which is Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. And we still have about 56 million left over. Okay, so that just shows you the sheer size of this market, and which makes it quite attractive. Again, sheer size doesn't mean much. It means one thing, that it's attractive, and there are people who can buy, but there are many other factors that have to be considered, of course. So increased income, leading to more consumption, which leading to more employment and better opportunities. Okay. So some of the things that are projected to grow and important in the Indian economy in the future are automobiles, transportation non-durables, in terms of personal non-durables. Then you have, TV, videos, appliances, telecommunication, and medical services, and many other things. So these are the things that are going to grow in the future, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and present opportunities for businesses. You combine this with the penetration rates of, whatever product category we're talking about, and I have some examples here that I got from World Bank. Again, I'm sorry, the visuals are not very clear here, but you can see India is in the bottom here. And this shows the number of internet users for every 100 users. So it's still quite low, but it's still quite low, but it's growing as compared to other countries. Then you have this is the cell phone subscribers for every 100 people, and it's now close to 70 people. And I'm really shocked, because I used the same data about 3 to 4 years ago, and this percentage was very, very low. Okay, and when I was updating the slide, I was really shocked that it has gone up a lot. But still, there is a lot of opportunity here. So, being from marketing, I had just done a very quick. This is something which I teach my students just to have a back of the envelope demand calculation for something that you're interested in. So let's say you're wanting to sell cell phones in the Indian market, and you have a total population of 1.2 billion. Okay, I know from the numbers that about 65% of these are between 15 and 64 years of age, and that is, let's say, the age where you are more likely to own a cell phone. So I'm going to reduce this to about 80 million consumers, and 30% of that does not have cell phones at the moment. Okay, would they like to have cell phones? Yes, of course they would like to have cell phones, but they don't, maybe due to some reasons. So this is about 230 million consumers, which is again equivalent to the total population of Spain, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom. Okay, so what are the companies doing? Okay, I'll give you an example now, which is quite interesting. Nokia, for example, they used to have a model of bringing the cell phones from the Western markets. Okay, so and other companies do the same. So you have a successful model here in the European and the American markets. You take it to the emerging market. Okay, you make some changes, or you just take it there. So after the models are working here for a few years, then you take them to the emerging markets, and you assume that they're going to work. But now the model of innovation is changing. People are realizing that the market is so big that you have to think in terms of, okay, let's try to develop products for them from scratch if possible, so that they can be more successful. So this is an example. Nokia hired some researchers to go and study how people use cell phones in a village in India or in some rural areas. These people lived with the villagers for some time. They took notes, they did their research, and they came back with the finding that mobile phone is not something that is owned and used by one person here in this country, in this context. So they saw cases where one village has a few cell phones, or even one cell phone. Let's say a small village has one cell phone, and they are circulating the number amongst them. And if I have a cell phone and somebody's calling me, say, hey, can you call Carlo? He lives right in the next street. And I go running to Carlo, I say, Carlo, here's a phone for you. And Carlo gets the phone, and Carlo attends the phone. So we are all sharing the phone. Why? Because lack of resources. So they came up with some phones which are very sturdy, very basic. Okay, because these are functional products. We talk about functional needs and emotional or symbolic needs. So these are functional products. People want these phones just to talk. Okay, they don't want to use them for sending messages or Twitter or Facebook. Okay, they want very functional, basic phones in this part of the market. So they created these phones which have multiple address books. They have very strong bodies, because if the phone is passing from one person to another, it's bound to fall down and break. They even put in a flashlight. Okay, because unfortunately in India we don't have electricity 24 hours a day, in most of the places. So people, when you don't have electricity, what do? You look for a flashlight, a candle, or whatever. So they put in this, and these phones are very, very successful in India because they marketed them as made in India and made for India. Okay. So some other numbers about the ownership of durables. Which, there's a clear gap between the poor and the non-poor people. The people who are in the deprived category, they are very, very poor and they cannot afford many things. So that's a bottom of the pyramid approach that many companies are following. And this is another example of a very nice innovation. It's a fridge. It's called a nano fridge with no compressor. It runs on batteries. Again, because if you don't have electricity and you put a fridge in your house in a village, if you don't have electricity, it's not going to work. Okay? So you have this nano fridge running on battery, 7.8 kilograms, 43 liters in capacity, and cost about 50 euros. Okay? So these are the kind of innovations that are coming up from those markets, the rural markets, where people don't have enough resources and they have a different way of doing things. So companies are studying them and they're creating these products. About 70% of India lives in rural area, and the remaining 30 is and this is known to be stark different between the two segments, the rural and the urban. And many companies divide them on this basis. I give you another example here. Coca-Cola is known to be a standardized product. You know, it's quite standard, as if you talk about standardization across the globe, you know, Coca-Cola is among the top. However, when they go to India, you know, they wanted to go into the rural market. And they know that in the rural market, a person needs refreshment. They're not going to spend a lot of money and buy maybe a big bottle of Coca-Cola. They'll go for a chai tea, which is a small cup of tea for 2 rupees maybe, or some other way of refreshment. So they created this, 200 milliliter small bottle of Coca-Cola, which cost about 5 rupees at the time a few years ago. And the message was, Coca-Cola means refreshment. Okay, that is the message. That Coca-Cola wanted to be more generic. They were not saying buy Coca-Cola as compared to Pepsi or we are better than. No, they were saying consider us as chai or as lassi or as whatever, lemonade, and we want to be among your options. Okay, so again, an impact of how they study this market. Another trend which is quite interesting for this market is micro-consumption. So people, who have money, they'll usually buy shampoos and soaps and whatever, bath gels in big bottles, and they keep them, they use them. In the poor India, people, they may not have the resources, or they may not have the sense, or the economic freedom to have a budget for 1 month and say, I'm going to buy a shampoo or this thing for this month's budget. So they just buy a small packet, a sachet of shampoo or whatever it is, and they use it. You know, if you want to shampoo your hair once, you buy this small thing and you don't have to buy the whole bottle. Okay, there's another trend which is quite successful in that rural market. Then you have some other innovations like this car, Tata Nano, which was created as being one of the cheapest cars, very low priced and very functional. And the inspiration was an Indian family going on a scooter with, I don't think it will be possible here in this country, but you'll see that a lot in India. You have one kid in the front, one in the middle, or maybe 2 in the middle, and then the 2 parents driving together. So the Tata company tried to create something which provides them a bit more safety and from the weather and from the road elements. So that was the origin of this car. Okay, Tata Nano. Then, the new retail formats. In India, the retail situation is very different from here. You know, we have about, I would say 95% of the retail is highly fragmented. It is composed of small retail mom and pop stores. But now things are changing with a lot of new foreign investment. There are supermarkets, superstores. This is a photo that I clicked a few years ago from a mall in Amritsar, which is where I'm from, and people love it. You know, they are always, the malls are always busy. The stores, people are buying a lot of things. They're going to the movies, so they're loving these new retail formats. So this is an opening of a mall in 2010, and you see the number of people you can see there. So it's very attractive for the people. Then you have some new concepts like Walmart has been trying to enter the Indian market. They collaborated with the local company, opened a cash and carry wholesale store. Now they're separated their ways, but eventually I believe we will see a lot more foreign investment, and we'll see supermarkets, hypermarkets, a lot of things in India. And I think I'm approaching probably the last few slides. So we have been talking about the bottom of the pyramid, the poor people, the middle class, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that there is also the top of the pyramid, the globals that we talk about, the creamy layer. India has one of the fastest growing populations of millionaires. So all the brands that you can imagine that are catered to the luxury markets, they are either available in India or they're going to enter very soon. Okay, and some of the examples are given here. So I would like to summarize and end because I wanted to consume no more than 45 minutes so we can have interactions and stuff. By these few slides so we have a strong population, okay, very youthful demographic profile, a blooming middle class which is projected to grow a lot and reach about 40% of the population in 2025. It's very attractive. And it becomes even more interesting when you look at the low penetration rates of certain products. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Okay. So the growth in the disposable income and the spending shift from the necessity to the discretionary has created a lot of demand for automobiles, for transportation non-durables, medical services, education, and telecommunication. And these categories will see the highest growth in the next 10 to 15 years. However, there are problems, okay? There are problems in India. We have, the economy is not growing as much as it was expected in the last couple of years. We have problems with infrastructure, with power, with development. We have problem with corruption as well, okay? It is unfortunately ranked at 87th in the list of 178 countries, where first rank means the least corrupt countries, okay? And so that's unfortunate. That is changing now because people are becoming more and more aware of this. There are political parties that are coming up and they are attacking this issue of corruption and bureaucracy. But still, I think we have a long way to go there. To add to all this, if you consider the very complex diversity, a highly fragmented distribution system of retails, wholesale, and very traditional, progressive at the same time traditional population, and you add to that competitiveness and the slow growing economy and the global economy these days, it becomes a quite difficult situation and not very easy to understand and to operate in. However, I would say that it offers a great promise to anyone who is willing to invest time and effort in trying to understand and accept that the market is different, it is diverse, it has its own peculiarities and intricacies, and to invest and to create products and services according to the needs of the market. So with this, I will end with some quotes from some managers of some companies who think India to be a very important market for them going into the future. And this, I believe, is the last slide, so I would like to thank you guys very much for listening to me.
Muchas gracias, JJ. I'll be talking Spanish. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Bueno, a mí personalmente me ha parecido muy interesante la presentación. Creía que sabía algo de India y he descubierto que sigo sin saber nada, que hay muchísimas cosas por aprender. Y ahora es el momento del debate, o sea que cualquiera puede hacer preguntas, las que sean, y que el ponente, pues si es capaz de contestar, contestará, si no es capaz, no contestará. Pero como tengo el privilegio de tener el micrófono en mano, no lo voy a dejar y le voy a hacer yo una pregunta. Me ha surgido mientras te escuchaba al final, en realidad, y es, visto todo lo visto, con cifras y magnitudes que utilizando un término inglés es astonishing, es decir, realmente nos quedamos apabullados. Yo que vengo del sur de Italia, que somos 4 gatos, allí pues sois muchos y vais a ser muchos más, pero pensando desde un punto de vista universitario y creyendo que nuestras universidades necesitan seguir internacionalizándose, y hablo, si me permitís, mis compañeros de Deus y comillas también de las tres, no solo de la URL, ¿qué podemos ofrecer las universidades de aquí en un país que tampoco es de los top of mind, probablemente? ¿Y por qué un indio debería venir a estudiar en nuestras instituciones? Y para que así sea, ¿qué deberemos hacer para que esto sea posible?
Thank you, Carlo, for your comment and the question. This thing actually, I've been thinking about and talking to some other colleagues as well. There's a lot of demand of education, as you have seen in my presentation and probably in some other presentations as well. And there's a lot of Indian students who go to other countries. The main targets are Canada, United States, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, because of the links of the English language. And then, other countries as well. At ESADE, Carlo knows much better than I do, we are able to attract a lot of people from different countries, including India. And it was quite surprising. Last couple of years, the batch we have at ESADE in the MBA program, we have about, out of 150 students that we intake, I would say about 30 or maybe more students from India. So, they come and they study, and they're very good students. And then they go on, and some stay back, and some go back, and some find jobs in other places. So I think if the offer that we create in ESADE, I think it's quite attractive for them because of the value proposition and all, and the ranking. But in general, I believe there are some problems that we need to probably tackle, and one of them could be the language. Okay. I remember a personal anecdote. When my wife arrived here, she wanted to study English literature, and we were asking around, and we went to one of the universities here. I wouldn't name it. It was not Ramon, Llull, okay. And we were talking about the studies of English literature, and we were told that the Shakespeare and all that stuff is taught in Castellano, okay. So, and that was kind of very strange, because if you want to study English literature, you don't want to study it in Spanish, okay? You want to study Shakespeare, you don't want to study it and translate it into Spanish. I think that's one of the biggest problem, in my opinion, is, to create offers for students which are more in competition with what other countries are offering them, so that they can come here and they can feel free to study in whichever language they please to. If they want to learn Castellano, Catalan, perfect, they have the opportunity. But I think this is one of the major reasons. And the other reason, which I believe is also important, is being an Indian myself, it's once you come here and you study, then you ask a question, what do I do? I've spent a lot of money, I've been away from my family, living here, spending money, so I need a job, okay? So the universities here, if we are not able to place the students well here, or maybe back home where they come from, then we are again in a very difficult situation. There are countries like Canada, or maybe the United Kingdom or Australia, where students go there, they become a part of the job pool, and they end up staying there and living there and being integrated into the society. Here it's slightly different. I personally know many students who come here, they get their education, they complete it, and then they say, okay, now what do we do? Because the companies, they prefer Europeans over Indians, because we have an Indian passport, we don't have a work visa, and the laws here about that are quite stringent and quite strict. So I think there are some bureaucratic processes, there are some things about creating values, proposition for the students, which could make it more interesting.
Okay, thanks a lot, JJ. Y ahora, pues si hay preguntas, JJ será feliz de contestarnos. Tenemos micrófono también, ¿no? Allí, con Alex ya preparado. Pues parece que no has tenido éxito.
I think nobody understands.
Aquí hay preguntas, aquí. Pues como somos gentlemen, le damos la palabra primero a ella.
Hola, buenos días.
Buenos días.
De hecho, me interesaría saber, ya que llevas unos 12 años fuera de la India, y lo que tú dices, tu experiencia en Estados Unidos y ahora en España, si tú te plantearas volver, cuando fuera, pero pongamos que de aquí un año o dos, si tú decidieras volver, ¿qué crees tú, con tu know-how que has aprendido, pero también con tus raíces indias, por dónde empezarías tú con tu contribución? Si una vez llegaras, profesor de marketing, lo que ya conoces de estos dos sitios donde has estado, ¿cuál crees tú que sería lo primero que harías?
That's a very good question, actually, personally, for me, because we are always playing with the idea of, what is future going to be for me and my family. For the moment, we are very happy here, and I feel very fortunate to be here because this is an amazing culture, and I've learned a lot from the culture and from ESADE, from colleagues. And I think for me personally, if I were to go back, I would do what I do best. I will train people. I will help them understand the value of investigación de mercados, which I have learned, a lot of new skills and a lot of ways to teach, which I think I would not have learned if I were still in India. So I will definitely keep my line the same, which is teaching, but I will probably bring with me a very new and fresh look into the teaching field, which maybe it exists, but not so much. I got the opportunity to go back last month in January, and some of the local universities invited me to give a talk to the students, and they found that I was able to bring in quite something different and unique to the table, and the students were very happy. But I feel that I studied in the same system. I was among those students at one time. But I have learned quite a few things, I think, just because of being exposed to these cultures. So I will probably go, if I were to go back, I will probably try to implement that and bring my learnings from my experience here back home and try to train my students for a more international career.
Muchas gracias por la presentación. Te haré la pregunta en inglés. You concentrated a lot on growth and the attractiveness of the market, and from the business perspective, what in your opinion needs to happen to get the ease of doing business number down to a double-digit sort of quantity to make it really attractive, not just because of the possibility, the potentiality of the market, but the reality of entering now rather than the future?
Sure. That's a very good question, and also not a very easy one to answer. Because the ease of doing business, it actually has been getting worse in the last few years. It used to be 120 something, 130, then now it's 134. So despite the effort that the government apparently has been making, it's actually getting worse. So in my opinion, good economic policies and getting rid of some of the bureaucracy, because we have wonderful ideas in India. They're very smart people, and they present very good ideas, but the implementation is lacking. There's no implementation. When it comes to actually getting the work done, it never gets done. So that, in my opinion, is the biggest hurdle moving forward, and that has to be taken care of. Along with that, the corruption problem, which is quite widespread. As I said before, there are some people who are getting together now and becoming more aware and trying to implement more accountability in the government. So in my opinion, along with building the infrastructure and doing all this thing, the implementation and getting rid of the log jams is the key moving forward.
And as a follow-up question, what you're mainly talking about, in my opinion, is behavioral change, which usually takes quite a long amount of time to actually achieve. So how optimistic are you of achieving these things in the short term?
Not in the short term. I don't think things can turn around in a very short term. But I'm more positive looking forward, let's say 10, 15, 20 years into the future. Okay? Maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, not enough. But I think 10, 15, 20, 25 years into the future, things will change.
Muchas gracias por la presentación. Voy por el tema de la permisividad, sobre todo en religión en la India. India siempre ha tenido fama de ser, el hinduismo, una religión muy permisiva. Allí han convivido todas las religiones, el presidente Sikh, pero últimamente hay un partido, sobre todo, que en Tamil Nadu, en Maharashtra, en Bihar, pues tiene mucha importancia y obtiene grandes cargos y se presenta incluso como anticristiano. ¿Qué futuro? No recuerdo el nombre del partido, pero es bien conocido, ¿verdad? ¿Qué futuro hay sobre la convivencia de las diferentes religiones, al menos en esas zonas de la India?
Sure. That's an interesting question. Actually, going back into like you mentioned, into the history of the country, India has been very open to anyone who has come, and we have embraced everyone. So, it's very interesting to look at how people from different cultures and different ethnicities, different religions, they live together in a general level. Okay, there are some problems. I know there are certain parties, certain people who are more nationalistic, pro-Hinduism, and they probably want to stick with the more conservative approach. But the problem with that approach is that we don't have a history which is conservative. We have been a very open-minded culture from the very beginning. So I think in short term, we see certain problems. People are maybe fighting with each other. We have had riots recently between Hindus and Muslims. In the past, we have had problems sometimes between Sikhs, my religion, and Hindus, between Sikhs and Muslims. So, of course, in such a big country, when you have so many people, so many religions, there are bound to be certain problems. Okay, but in general, this is my opinion that we know how to take care of these problems and move forward. And I see no other way of that because otherwise, if we start fighting with each other, the country will go nowhere. So, and people realize that. Okay. So in a broad sense, people, they want to move forward and they want to work together, but there are certain elements. But I'm really personally not too worried about them, and I think we are going to be okay in the long run. And that will be my response.
Felicitaciones por la exposición. Los que todavía creemos en la utopía de un mundo mejor o que otro mundo es posible, quería preguntarte sobre el legado de Mahatma Gandhi. Aquí me encuentro con muchos indios, sobre todo del Punjab y Pakistán, que echan la culpa de los problemas de India a Mahatma Gandhi, a la independencia. Yo quería preguntarte, el Papa Francisco hace poco ha dicho poco más o menos que el modelo capitalista es tan malo o peor que el comunismo como modelo social y económico. Quería preguntarte, actualmente, frente a la crisis europea o de medio mundo, frente a los modelos económicos vigentes, ¿cuál es el legado de Gandhi actualmente en la India?
If I understand, I don't know if I understood it correctly, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Mahatma Gandhi is a very well-respected figure all over India and globally as well. However, there are people who have, certain problems with the approach he had, and there will be different opinions, and I think we have to respect that. Talking about people from Punjab and Pakistan, one of the reasons why I think they might hold Gandhi in maybe a little less regard in general is because we have suffered a lot in terms of the partition of the country, and there have been many things historically. But in general, I think people believe him to be the father of the country. That's what we call him. And there are people who criticize him. There are people who say that he was not, he fought for Indians in South Africa and not for the Africans. And then so there's a lot of things about him that are said. But I think we have to be open-minded and accept these criticisms as well. I don't know if I got the second part of your question right, Carlo. I don't know if you want to.
It's about what the situation now here in Europe, where it seems that the democracy based on capitalism doesn't work that much. He was referring to the Pope. I don't know if you quoted correctly something he said, but anyway he said that the Pope says that the capitalism probably is not, demonstrate it's not the right way to go, or not enough.
Right.
And what do you think?
Right. Well, that question is not very easy to answer because many people have been trying to answer it for many centuries now. You know, which is the best way of governing or best way to going forward with the economy. I think a balanced approach. Whatever works for given the current situation. Opening up a bit because we have followed a lot of socialism-based conservatism in the first part of when the country got independence. And that just led us to nowhere, basically. So there was a lot of crisis. So then they opened up and liberal to the foreign economies, and we are improving a bit. So I think a balanced approach, maybe protecting your own self-interest, having a bit of a social thing, and then also opening up and being more positive to foreign investment and all. I think a balanced approach will be, for me, the right way to go.
Ok, muchísimas gracias, JJ.